Good evening. Welcome to Higher Definition. Hearing that full intro song brings me back to our studio days, and I think we celebrate 15 years Labor Day weekend. I think it's either Memorial Day or Labor Day. We celebrate 15. It's been a long ride, and that song is not by coincidence. It was actually wrote for the show. Jamie Brown, national recording artist, wrote that for the show. And to this day, I do not know who that lady is that's singing in there, but her voice is beautiful. But he made that for the show. He enjoyed our show so much when we were on the radio station at WRHI that he wrote that song for us. So I want to thank everyone for watching and joining and listening and supporting us over 15 years. I mean, we got a lot going on, and then had a lot going on in these 15 years. I want to secondly say thank you, Pastor Ed, for joining us. He's right on time, right on time, and he true to his word. Say, hey, you ever need me, last minute or not, I'm there. And praying for Marlon and his family as they're experiencing death, and that can come knock on any of our door at any time. Somebody who was planning out their full day today did not wake up this morning. So definitely praying condolences to his family. Mr. Abel, how's your week been, sir?
Hey, it's been pretty eventful. You know, last week I was out. You know, I was in San Antonio. My stepdaughter was getting married. It made it through that, and our anniversary was the day before. So you know, we had a pretty good week. And then also tomorrow will be my 20-year anniversary on my job. I started there 20 years ago tomorrow.
Man, congratulations. And for anyone that personally knows Everett Abel, if you call him for his birthday, he gonna act like it's just another day. Yeah. Appreciate it. You call him for his anniversary. Yeah, man. All right, yeah, we ain't doing that. All right, man. But I'm proud of Everett. Like most people know, I've known him a long time. And man, very, very nonchalant about everything. But congratulations, happy anniversary. Happy work anniversary. You know, that's the most important, Everett, is the work. You know, that's the most important. So happy anniversary, sir. Al, how are you, sir?
Hey, I'm doing good, man. Living a dream.
That's a nice, great response. And I'm Pastor Ed, how are you, sir?
Same as Brother Al. I'm living the dream.
Y'all got a lot of dreams you're living. Tia, I know you're going to give us a little bit more than that. How are you, ma'am?
I'm great. Living the dream.
Everybody living the dream. Boy, I swear.
Man, I don't want to be left out, man. I also am living a dream.
Okay, yeah, I'm living the dream. This for us will be a show that we planned on, part of it talking about 2 weeks ago. It was a part of our, I think, current events show, right, Everett?
It was the do's and don'ts of the church, I believe.
Do's and don'ts of the church. And we ran out of time, but I guess our timing wasn't right. God's timing was better. So as we moved into Sunday and we were asking what the show was going to be, we can slide this right on back in and pick up where we left off from the do's and don'ts of church. So we're going to touch on some things tonight that for some people might be an easy conversation. Some people might be a little uncomfortable. Bringing guns to church, is that okay? Violence, you know, when is it okay to have violent circumstances happening? And of course, this conversation comes off of something basic, but something that has grabbed the national attention and world attention to some degree, the brawl in Montgomery, Alabama. And I'll start with you, Pastor Ed. What is the first thing you thought when you saw that video?
Man, the first thing I thought was wow, right? It's just wow. You know, I've been on the side of the road with a flat tire and everybody drove by me. To see someone jump in the water and go swim and enter the fray is a lot different than anything I've seen.
That is an excellent point. Tia, what were your thoughts?
I watched it. My first thought was, man, what's going on? Of who are these people coming across the water? Like maybe they're family and they, and then I watched it again and I started reading the comments and I was like, whoa, this is just a black on white brawl.
Al, and as a member of law enforcement active, what was your take?
Well, at the time I saw it, I wasn't a member of law enforcement. I wasn't at work. I will be honest with you. The first thing I thought was, please don't let nobody get shot.
Yes, sir.
When they started approaching that boat, those people was in that boat. I was like, please don't let nobody get shot.
No, valid point. And Mr. Abel, what was your take?
Well, to be honest with you, when I was first watching it, I'm thinking, well, it's just another video of a black man being, abused and beat up, and this didn't turn out to be that. So, to be honest with you, I felt good watching it. You know what I'm saying? To be honest with you, maybe that's not the right feeling to have, but like just to see like people standing up for themselves and standing up for other people. I guess we'll get into it later on, but my thoughts on it kind of evolved later on. But just initially, I was thinking like, wow, I had never seen this before,
And that is a great starting point because me and you've had different conversations all week, and me and you ain't been on the same page about this. And I think that's natural. Like people can look at the same thing and not agree and think something else in the world. Tia, do you think it's natural for folks to go through a sense of emotions when it comes to things like this? I mean, part of me and Everett's initial conversation was about race. Like, this is white versus black. And I'm like, nah, this is somebody standing up. And we were just going through different emotions about it. Was it for you an emotional feeling?
Emotion like mad, like what's going on, watching people get hit, watching people get, jumped, like when they initially, like the black guy, when he threw his head up and they were jumping him, initially, like, I mean, why are they jumping him? What's going on? Like somebody help him, the rush of excitement and anger in it. But then I guess as more and more videos and more angles come out, you start watching everything that's going on. It's just like, I need to hear the whole story about this. I need to understand everything that happened because at that point it just became I really don't know what happened. I really don't know what I'm watching.
And Pastor Ed, I'll go to you because all of our life experiences are different. Where we feel violence is different. What were your feelings and I want to say one, as a man, but two, as a father of young women, because women were in that fray. Like normally, and I'll say this definitely from the black men usually try to keep their women back. Hey, you don't belong in this. We got this, no matter what the consequences. What were your feelings when you saw it?
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the things. I'm like, man, these are somebody's daughters. To be honest, that is one thing I thought was, man, this is somebody's daughters. And the problem with violence like this is the escalation, right? What is it going to escalate to? As I'm watching, I'm like, man, these things don't end well, right? And it's always the person trying to break it up.
No, go ahead.
It's always the person trying to break it up that seems to catch the bullet, right? So that's the one thing, it's kind of annoying to watch a million people with camera phones, like taking pictures of people getting their behinds beat up. Like that kind of annoys me, but at the same time, I guess it's better than doing nothing.
No, that's an excellent point. Al, I know you weren't on duty, so you weren't a member at that moment, but what were your emotions as a man watching that? And for me,
initially, I was proud of the people stepping up to help that brother because he was getting beat up for doing his job. That was my initial thought. I was actually proud to see people actually step up because we've seen too many videos of like Pastor said, of getting beat up. And next thing you know, you hear people in the background yelling World Star, and all of this stuff. But that's not what happened. You had one kid jump in the water, swim across there. You had people run down to help him. And then it got to the point where it got completely out of control. And my law enforcement background, I'm thinking, okay, this is about to escalate to where these people are going to be fearful of their life, and they're going to start shooting people. That's why I said earlier that I hope nobody gets shot, because that's exactly what I was waiting on.
And Everett, from the human emotion standpoint, you know, your thoughts outside of feeling good, and this is another thing I realized. There must have been 100 different cell phones out that day. From the very beginning, folks sensed something was wrong. And I think the first one that came out was not edited to take something away, but it was showing different angles. So you really your sense of what was going on was based on the one video you saw. But as the week got on, you saw, man, it's 100 videos out here floating around with this. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm with Al, man, and you know, thank you for your service in the law enforcement community. And you know, those of you who watch this show, you know, I'm a member of the Facebook law enforcement community, and one of my main jobs is seeking out violent videos and turning people in. And when I go through these videos, a lot of times I see like what Al was talking about, like people holding cameras and somebody just getting dogged, and it ain't even a racial situation. A lot of times it could be a black person, a white person, whatever. But to see somebody just get beat down and ganged up on, and nobody helping, you know. So that was part of my initial, you know, feeling and emotion for, it's like, man, people are finally helping. And I guess later on we get into the point, like at what point does self-defense stop and vengeance begin? Because I believe at some point in this fight, the self-defense ended, and then some people just taking upon themselves to you know, enact vengeance on the perpetrators.
That's an interesting point.
Yep, that's what I said.
And me and Everett had different conversations, so I smile about that, because yeah, like if you ain't got beat up, and what is the point where it's too much to seek your revenge? I know biblically that, and you know, morally that might be a line that needs to be drawn, but who's telling you that line when you're in a fight? And I agree with everyone. The thoughts that, man, that could have went terribly wrong with gun violence. Like, those folks got back on their platoon boat, and I don't understand for the life of me why the folks on the dock didn't follow them to their boat, because normally folks who take part in recreational events are carrying guns. And Alabama, with a history of violence towards minorities, we would see something different, and probably no charges at the end of it. So I am definitely pleased, and that's the word I use when I was talking to Everett a lot this week, that folks stood up for somebody. And we were getting the narrative wrong. And I say black folks, saying that the guy was a security guard, he was a dockhead. No, he was the co-captain of the boat. But it just sounded more natural to say that guy was a security guard or something without the facts. You know, we couldn't elevate him up to a top position. Nah, he was a security guard. The second thing, and I'm going to put my hat on, I need to carry a hat everywhere I go, because obviously that is the war cry for violence now. I've never saw anything about that. And I'm going to ask this in a lighthearted moment. Al's shaking his head. Al, have you ever saw anything like that, when you just throw your hat and that means rally around?
Nah, but I've seen a million memes. The new bat symbol.
Oh boy. Tia, have you saw anything like that?
No, I haven't seen anything like that before, but like Al, I've seen all the memes, and there must be millions of them out there now. So if you get in trouble, make sure you got your hat with you. And I don't think it matters now what color the hat is, as long as it goes up.
Pastor Ed, come on, tell me you got a laugh out of that part, the hat getting thrown up.
Yeah, I mean, you got to, right? It's so unexpected. It's so unexpected. It's so unexpected.
And Everett, I saved you for last because we were talking about this early on. If you wrote a movie, you couldn't have wrote a script that had all this in it and folks would believe it. Like, none of it. The hat throwing up, tussling somebody in the water, other folks jumping in. Come on, Everett.
Nah. They did this at WrestleMania, man. Like they'd be like, man, Vince McMahon just didn't went too far this time. Like he just throwing people in the water, DDTing people, throwing the hat up, like people getting hit with chairs, like that's a bit much. And so it does look like something that was. I mean, I know it was real, but it looked like something that was staged because it's just too much extra stuff in there. But
And
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, I've looked this up since we saw this. Like, there's got to be something out there, but people reference that to like throwing your hat in the ring, like you're going to a competition, like you go into battle. That's what that means when you're throwing your hat up. It's like I'm throwing my hat in the ring. I'm gonna go into competition. So if you look it up, it is it's logic behind that, but I don't think that guy knew that when he did it. Like I thought, well, he just throwing a hat up because he don't want to get it messed up.
Nah. I think my man was like, man, forget this job. I get another job. That's why I think he was going with it, but I don't know.
Jimmy Dixon has posted two things that I think we can't miss in this topic. There is 100% a racial component and a historical component, regardless if people entered into that moment at the second thinking that. Some people probably thought they were defending someone. We can't forget this happened in Alabama, that has a history, just like most of the Deep South has a history of oppressive white on black violence through its history. And that happens to take place, or maybe it's not happenstance, at one of the largest slave ports in the South. So it's a lot to it. And when then you get people charged up, and I'm going to ask Al this question about this mob mentality when it comes to violence. And I know you've probably been called on scenes, or you witnessed, especially in the military, people get charged up. It could start off with one person, but as people get amplified, they feel a sense of unity, regardless if they got something to do with the situation. Have you saw that in law enforcement?
Oh yeah. Sometimes people, the emotion, because you got a thin line between normalcy and insanity. It doesn't take much to take a person one way or another. And just because you go one side of the line, that doesn't mean you can't come back. So you have all that adrenaline. In the case of men, sometimes you have all that testosterone. You may have some type of history, and people just they get involved, especially if they see a friend losing, or they see somebody that they actually don't like and that person is getting beat. They just want to jump in. And sometimes they get together and they plan these things, and they say, well, we all going to get this one person because this one person did this or did that. So yeah, unfortunately, we see it maybe not as much in the adult world as we do in the like high school or the the juvenile world, but we definitely see it.
And Pastor Ed, I ask you this from a spiritual standpoint, religious standpoint, about violence. Well, not only your take, but biblically, what does the scripture say about violence? Because we did this show because, man, we're surrounded by violence. You can't turn on the news for us that are in the Charlotte market or Charlotte area without seeing someone violently killed, guns or whatever. What is the spiritual take from that?
I mean, it's not black and white, right? There are times we have to use violence. If someone grabs my wife by the neck, I'm going to use violence. If someone touches one of my children, I am going to use violence. And I think it's a context. You have to know what you're doing. Are you defending yourself? Are you the aggressor? I think all those things matter, right? And then the opportunity to know when to stay and when to fight, right? I think we have to have discernment. I don't think it's cut and dry. I think there are times you do have to use violence, but I think there are other times that things that if people just kept their mouth shut wouldn't have escalated to violence.
There
You know,
you go.
so it's kind of knowing when is what, when to just fold your hand, right, and go away, and know when it's like, no, I'm gonna stick my feet in the ground and I'm gonna stand my ground on this one, right? You have to kind of know, you know, and I think that's what biblically it's talking about, because God advocated killing, so you can't say there was no violence. He told people to kill. He said to stone disobedient children, if we want to really go into it. You know, so if you think about those things, there was violence, Old and New Testament, right? It's just a matter of context. Like, what is the violence for? Is it for you? You know, is it to prove a point, or is it to protect or defend?
I mean, to follow what the pastor said, I mean, you know, we talking about the Bible. There's instances in the Old Bible, in the Old Testament, lots of instances, you know, where God actually, you know, used violence. Well, advocated using violence. You know, there was a wall of Jericho, and what happened once the wall came down? And if you want to go to the New Testament, what did Jesus do when he attacked the tax collector? That was violence. He didn't hit the man, but what did he do? Go and did he throw the tables over and stuff? What was that? I mean, there's times when
Necessary.
violence has to be used. I am a Christian, and in my job, there's times when I have to use violence to protect myself and to protect others. Like the pastor said, if somebody grabbed his wife, what do you think he's gonna do? We talked about, you know, you alluded to it earlier, about guns in churches. How many times have there been people bringing guns into churches and attacking churches, and the persons in the church had to use violence to take that person out? So there's times and places to use it, but you have to know when to use it and when not to use it.
Tia is the mother of 2
4.
and 4. How is that line drawn? When to be?
I'll lead this off by saying I agree with Pastor Ed on this all day, every day. I am a mom first, no matter what. And I'll give you an example of a situation and let you judge for yourself. But I took my girls, we went to the movies, and our girls were in the movie theater watching a movie. My girls and some of their teenage friends were in one movie. Me and my husband were across the hall in another movie. And my daughter texted me and she was like, can you come over? And so, you know, I got up and went over to the other movie theater. There were some grown people, 2 men and a woman, doing ignorant things in the movie theater, cursing at the kids. And, you know, I walked in and I sat down in a seat, you know, beside my girls. And when the movie was over, I stayed till the end of the movie, but they were trash talking the entire movie. I never said a word. I just sat there. I listened. The things they were saying to the girls, the grading stuff, just, you know, talking about kids not being in a movie, they didn't need to be there, things like that, just the stuff that they were saying. I never said a word. But when the lights came on and the movie was over, we stayed seated. I told the girl, stay seated. And when the girl went by and the 2 guys went by, the last guy jumped at one of the girls. And I assumed that he thought that I too was one of the kids, but I'm not a kid. And these are my kids. So even though it was just my daughter and her friends, when I have kids with me, those are my kids. I'm treating them like they are my kids and they are in my responsibility. So I told the girls, don't worry about it. I said, let's go. And I got up, and as they were headed out the theater, I said, I am not a child. I'm a grown woman and these are my kids. Don't test me. You've talked trash the entire movie. I've sat here and I've listened to you. I've recorded this. I've listened and I'm not pleased. And so they, you know, went out, they went into the bathroom and I waited outside for the girl to come out. She was the main one. I waited outside, and I went into the other theater when she went into the bathroom, and I told my husband, I said, I need you out. I need you out in the lobby. And I walked back out in the lobby when she came out, and I said, you guys were talking all that trash to my kids in the movie theater. I said, we're grown women. You should approach this like a woman. I said, and I told Chris, I said, hold my purse. I said, I'd like to see you bow that up and talk to me like you talk to these kids. Do not do that. Don't come at my kids like that, and don't try to placate me. Don't do that. These are just kids. Like, why would you go to the movie theater with that type of attitude? Like, I go to the movies all the time. I can't stand rude people in the movies. I can't stand people that talk during the movie and all that kind of stuff. And that's what was going on. But I guess I never understood their motives for doing what they were doing. And these were grown people. I never understood it. So I took it to mean like you want something. So you messing around, you can easily find out. Like, don't mess with people's kids and or families and things like that. But I was just saying, what are we doing? Like, you look like you in your early 40s, we look like we about the same age. These kids are 13, 14 years old. What are you doing? And it was more or less a mom, women to women, and then the guy comes out of the bathroom and he got in my face. Her boyfriend got in my face, and I right in his face, and Chris was there, and I was like, hey, y'all were bullying these kids in the theater, and it is my job as the parent here to address this. And if you guys can't, get this right, we can handle this. Like, this is what's going up. This is what's happening right now. And I'm not trying to, act like, I'm bad or anything like that. But also, it's a matter of defense and a matter of I'm standing up for my kids. Like, they didn't do anything wrong. I'm not going to uphold the kids in the wrong either. But I'm not going to allow them to be bullied and treated like they're nobody either. I'm not going to stand for that when I am there. When I am there, I am the protector. Like, I am the person. I'm not going to stand for that. So that's what I'm saying. Like, there is a time and a place for everything. And I made it perfectly clear. I was like, look here, I was professional today from 8 to 5. It's 7 o'clock. What you want to do? And I'm Christian. So, I mean, there's a time and a place for everything, just like there's a time and a place for you to be professional when you're on the job. But once I leave, I am mom. I am mom all day, every day. When I wake up, I am somebody's mom, and I take my job as a mom being very serious, just like I take my 8 to 5.
Everett, let me go to you on this, because I'm the master of strongly worded letters. And I've found that to de-escalate my own situations. Like, we all know each other, right? We know ourselves hopefully better than we know anybody else. Like, for me, if I get bad service, if I think I'm in a business, you've wronged me, you're getting a strongly worded letter.
Yes.
Because the alternative for me to face someone becomes, I know it will just escalate. Everett, what are your thoughts?
I'm a firm believer in de-escalation. But first of all, I just want to address some of the things we talked about. We look in the Old Testament, we see violence all over the place. I remember the Amalekites. God told them to go in and wipe out everything living. And even in the New Testament, I see when Jesus healed the servant of the centurion, he didn't say, okay, now that I did this for you, now you need to get out of the army and leave my country. Like, it wasn't that. But even in the New Testament, in the early church, and we see in history, like, they just felt the higher calling. Like, it was more about you than it is about me. So people willingly allowed themselves to be executed. People willingly walked in the lion's den, and that fearlessness and that courage actually backfired on the Romans. You know what I'm saying? It led more people to at least be curious and question is like, what is this faith that are causing these people to be so bold? then so like I love these conversations, man, because I really have to think. And we start, 2023, and we start talking about defending, not just defending myself like that. Okay, we can understand that. Maybe I'll be nonviolent then, but as a man, like rule number one, you got to defend your wife. If you don't stand up for your wife, man, you just might as well not even go home. Like, ain't even no point, And then like what T was saying with your kids, like these kids, like that's your responsibility. And then as a church leader, like these people are your responsibility. You can't just let people walk in there and just do whatever they want to do. But again, it does, get complicated. I believe there's a thin line between self-defense and vengeance, and where does that point cut off where I tell you, like I'm a type of person, like I'm not looking for no trouble, but like if you try to start a fight with me, like I'm gonna try to make that the most uncomfortable experience of your life. Like I don't want you to try this again. You know what I mean? And like what part of that is self-defense and what part of that is vengeance? And again, I don't want to act like I got all the answers. I got a lot of questions about this, and I've been asking a lot of people. And I hope y'all can help me out with this tonight.
I think Everett, I think that's more of teaching a lesson. Sometimes people need to be taught a lesson. And one thing about those people in Alabama, they were taught a lesson. Sometimes violence is a teacher. When your parents took that belt and hit you, that was violence. You don't consider it like a violent crime, but it was violence. But what did it teach you? Taught you not to do something.
Yeah, but also, Jesus healing the ear of the servant of the high priest, like that was a lesson as well, and we still learn from that lesson today.
Absolutely, there's lessons in everything. There's lessons in good. There's lessons in bad. Things that we did when we were young, the mistake that we made when we were young, those are lessons that we were supposed to learn and not do them again. But I give this analogy all the time. When we were growing up, when we were little babies, 2-3 years old, learning how to walk, mama was in the kitchen and she was cooking, and she had the stove on, the oven on, and the lights on, and you're a little baby and you see the light, you walk over there to that oven and you get ready to touch it. She said, no, don't touch that, baby, it's hot, right? You don't know what hot means, you ain't never experienced before. So you walk off, a couple of minutes later, you walk back over there, what she say? All right, now I told you it's hot. Guess what? You don't know what hot means. The third time she watched you reach and you touch that oven, what did you just learn? What hot means. Sometimes people have to learn lessons, and sometimes those lessons come with pain. Sometimes those lessons are taught by mistakes. Sometimes those lessons are taught by the pastor here through sermons. So there's lessons to be learned in everything that we do.
And I just wanted to comment on something that Mont was saying about the letters and stuff. So I'm not always, and this is choosing different situations. Like I think it's a real matter of self-control in deciding which side of the fence you're going to be on, right? In any given situation. It's a matter of self-control, because even as a parent or a husband in protecting your significant other or your children or any, person, it's a matter of self-control, right? And discipline and how you want to deal with it. Because we've all been in cases where maybe you had to go to school or something, somebody is doing something they probably shouldn't be, or you've been involved in a situation and you're just like, well, the higher road to choose at the time, because violence isn't going to serve you well in this situation, is to fact check people. So I've grown accustomed to fact checking people, writing the letters, and I call it give you a good education session. So it is a lesson being taught there is one, don't play around with the facts. Don't play around with people. So it's a way to avoid the violence when you know that the violence is going to take you somewhere you really shouldn't be in that case. And so writing the letters, I think, is a good thing. People piss you off on,
it's
these
the best thing ever.
when you go on a trip and the service is bad and stuff like that, I write them. I tell my parents to write them. You go and you get bad service, and people treat you like you are nobody, and they talk to you like you're nobody because they see the color of your skin, or because they think that you don't have a certain amount of money, you're not at a certain status. I am still a customer. I am still a person. I'm still a human being, and you should be treating me as such. And so I think a lot of times people get to thinking that they can just try anybody, and the lessons that they have to be taught sometimes requires violence, and sometimes it requires a lesson of education. Like, you mess around, you find out, and you could find out the wrong way or the hard way.
Lamont, I like that the letter part, because when you confront that waitress or that bartender or that valet or that person that gave you bad service, it only goes that far. Everybody has a boss.
Mm-hmm.
You sending letters of dissatisfaction to a corporation or to somebody's manager or supervisor is more likely to be addressed than if I just cuss that lady out, because all she's gonna do is go back to her friends and say, "Man, that man just cussed me out, but I don't care." Blah 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 blah. But you send that letter to that corporation, or you send an email to that corporation, you got a better chance to get some type of result.
Yes.
No, and I agree. And to be honest, that's more for me also. Like, me tackling things head on in the moment when I'm amped up or charged up won't go well. I know enough about me to know that. I know that might end in a situation that I don't need to put myself in. So writing and documenting, and some people on this panel know me very well. I write letters all the time. If I think, and I travel all the time. I travel for business all the time. I'll write a note in a minute when I think some service was off or you were off, because that's better than me confronting you on that moment, because then your pride in the way, mine in the way, and it's just going to escalate.
Right.
I want to thank all the people that's watching and commenting. We would love to hear from you. It's a deep conversation, right? It's not simple. It's not simple at all when you're talking about violence. Like, what are men and women of God talking about violence for? And some people might say condoning. I shared a video, and I follow a lot of the words from Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. And I shared one earlier. Malcolm X, and you're talking about in the 50s when he was saying this, early 60s, was talking about the time that people that we've come together is when, if something is wrong is happening, and Black people stand up, and Black people stand up for each other, that we've turned the page. But I think that's in all humanity, all mankind. I give the analysis of George Floyd's death that was captured on TV, 9 minutes on someone's neck. If someone would have stepped in, regardless of the consequences, in minute 1, minute 2, minute 3, it would have been a different outcome. But Everett mentioned the martyrs of the Bible, people willing to lose their life or sacrifice their life for safety. That's just not how we are these days. And for a lot of reasons, right? We got to think about the kids. We got to think about all these things. And it's tough. It's real tough. I want to change gears a little bit, and not so much because we've been talking about the church and the Bible, to talk about, and I definitely want to hear people's opinion on this one. And I'm going to start off with Pastor Ed, not to put him on the spot, but just to hear from a church leader standpoint. Is it okay, or when is it okay to carry a gun inside the church?
So for me, I think it's all context. You have to know yourself. Guns inherently aren't good or evil, right? They're a tool, like any other tool. But you have to know yourself. I have a bad temper, therefore I do not have a gun, because I know I can't control my temper enough to control when my temper gets to that point. I don't know if I have the self-control to handle a gun. Now, Everett, one of my best friends, is your cousin, right? We know what he carries, right? And I used to sit next to him in church, and I sat on one side of him because I knew what was on the other side, right? But he also knows what he's doing. The problem with carrying guns is most experts will tell you they can use your own gun against you. A professional can take your gun from you and kill you with it. So all these people that go to a range once every 3 months and think they know how to use a gun, they're really setting themselves up for a mess sometimes. They're not getting proper training. They're just grabbing a gun. They're just, and I think that's one of the things, and I'm not in law enforcement, Brother Al, you probably know more, but that's one thing that I think it's all context, and I don't think everyone should have a gun. There's people that have no business with a gun. And, but I also think you shouldn't be able to go into Kmart and buy a gun and wipe out a bunch of people and call it hunting either. So.
And I'm gonna save Al last on this question. Tia, is it okay? And please, if you're watching and listening, I'm curious. We're not trying to condemn. I'm just trying to get our logic in 2023 on guns and violence. And sometimes those things are not mutually exclusive, right? Like, is it okay to carry a firearm inside the church?
Personally, I don't think you should have your gun in the church, but I mean, that's just my opinion. But on the other hand, I mean, having the gun in the church and nobody knows you have the gun in the church on you, who is it hurting? You know what I mean? Like, who is it hurting? What is it doing if you have it? No one knows you have it. I know somebody used to carry a gun in their purse everywhere they went, including the church. So that's what I'm saying. But like, only select few people knew that. Nobody. So it wasn't hurting her, wasn't hurting the people around her. So who does it affect and who does it hurt to know, if no one knows that you're carrying the weapon in the church?
Man, you gotta be careful with them grandmas. Grandmas especially old school grandmas, switchblades, 22s, all kinds of
That's
stuff.
what I'm saying though. So how is carrying the gun in the church different from your old grandpa that goes around with his switchblade in his pocket every day? He never goes without his switchblade. He always has his knife in his pocket. So how is that different from having your gun on you?
I think the amount of violence you can inflict in a very short time with a gun,
I understand,
outweighs
but
any
they're both
knife.
weapons.
Yeah. I get it on the surface. Yeah, weapons. But the amount of destruction you can do within fractions of a second with a gun into the holy place can be tremendously more. Mr. Abel, your thoughts on guns in church?
Yeah, I was looking at what Jimmy Dixon was saying about how, the nonviolent MLK's, nonviolent movement was based on Gandhi's idea, not the Bible. I do look at I see nonviolence as more as a political tactic than necessarily something that we should hold to. Like when Jesus turned the other cheek, he's talking about an extreme sense of selflessness that is uncommon and very unpopular in our society. But at the same time, Jesus tells his disciples that, if you don't have a sword, sell your coat and buy one. Again, I might, maybe people might say I'm misinterpreting that, but there's a certain level of nonviolence I believe that is irresponsible, especially when it comes to your responsibility for protecting the people within your realm of responsibility. Your family, your people you go to church with, the people you love. I mean, you have a responsibility to protect those people. And in the days and time we live in, that might require a gun. I imagine, and I want to second guess people or judge folks, but when you think about the Mother Emanuel shooting, I'm sure there are people there who wish they had something, to equalize the situation, or at least nullify some of the damage that man was able to do. It's just to me, it's just like it's more compassionate. You know what I mean? Like you got all these people, man, they're sitting here sitting ducks. And then you said something earlier about, black people jumping in to help and not, man, I can't sit there and watch nobody, brutalize a dog. Like I got to put a stop to that. You know what I mean? So regardless of the race or even whether I even like the person or not, like there's a certain level of humanity that we all should have towards one another. And again, if that requires me, say, hey, we need to break this up or grabbing somebody or even taking it a step further, I believe that's what we should do if we love one another.
And let me go to Al, and I saved him for last for a reason. He has different credentials than we have and a lot more firsthand on security. Go ahead, Everett.
No, I'm saying I'm in law enforcement too. You keep leaving me out. So I'm just saying.
Facebook police don't count. We ain't counting the Facebook police. Al has different credentials and different experience, experience that goes to this topic. Al, your thoughts on guns inside the church?
Well, first, I apologize for the noise. I had to turn my air conditioner off. It decided it didn't want to come on and start making noise like it's trying to cool off the whole community. So just to give everybody a little background on me, I am the Director of Security for the South Atlanta Episcopal District of the AME Zion Church. There's probably around 200 churches that I'm responsible for the security for, and that includes the Kenneth Moreau Transformation Center on Saluda Street. I'm direct security there, so I'm really familiar with this topic. We talked a little bit before the show started, and I'll tell you this: it's better to have a gun in your church and not need it than need one and not have it. The school shootings, the synagogue shootings, the church shootings, the grocery store shootings, all of this stuff happened in places that are known as soft targets. Soft targets are places that are less likely to be secured by someone with a firearm. Mm-hmm. Well, how do you stop that? Well, you bring your weapons into your church. But that person that carries that weapon has to be able to step in when the time is needed. They need to be trained. They need to be confident. And they need to be able to handle themselves in a stressful situation. And I gave an analogy earlier where I said Mr. Joe. Mr. Joe, he's one of them slow walkers like Eric was talking about. Take the short steps now. Was in the military during World War II or Korea. And he said, man, I'll take care of it if something happened in here. But then when something happened, he the first went out the door and leaving people in there. There's another thing about having a weapon in church. In the state of South Carolina, and I can only speak for the state of South Carolina, it is illegal to bring a weapon in the church unless you are a law enforcement officer, because you are exempt from that law, or you were designated by the pastor of the church or his designee. So technically, a person sitting in church with a weapon is actually committing a violation. But in today's society, the way that the mindset, the mental health of our people in general, the vulnerability of our churches. Our churches are out in the middle of nowhere sometimes. And when you go to church nowadays, who do you see mostly sitting in there? Women. You don't see very many men in the church anymore. When I grew up, the men were the staple of the church, and you don't see as many men. And that's not for every church, but there's a lot of churches where there's mostly females. Somebody has to protect them. The thought of it'll never happen to me, or it'll never happen to us, or it'll never happen here. You need to get out of that mindset and start thinking when it happens here. So if you think about when it happens here, then you'll be prepared for it when it happens. If you say it'll never happen here, you will never be prepared for it. So that comes with training. That comes with talking to your local sheriff's office or your local police department to see what type of training that they have. Evaluate your churches. Churches are easy targets. There's a lot of money in churches that are not secure. Soft target. One of the first things I tell a church when I do an evaluation is, where do you count your money? They take you to a little door. Do you keep your door open or closed when you count? Oh well, we keep it closed. Somebody knocks and wants some change back for that $50 bill they gave you because they want $25 back. What do? Well, we open the door, give it to them. Well, who do you know is outside that door? I said you can solve that by buying a $12 peephole. Drill your little hole in it, put the peephole in there, and you can see who's coming in and out. Something simple like that. It's a little off topic, but yeah, it's absolutely 100% okay to bring a weapon in the church. We shouldn't have to. We shouldn't have to. We should be a society of God-fearing people who understand that the things that we do will put us in hell. But unfortunately, drugs, poverty, and racism will trump that. So get your security team. Make sure the person that has that weapon is familiar with it, and that person is the person that's going to be protecting you, your spouse, and your children.
I think the things you named are right on topic, because a lot of people will sit and go to churches, and people probably have guns in it. And that's probably a comment. If I ask anyone, hey, you think anyone has a gun at your church? Most people say, yeah, probably someone. But then the second part of that reassurance is, can they use it when they need to use it? Are they familiar with neutralizing some type of threat to not only the church, but themselves without creating more damage? And we see it all the time in shootouts, that people end up shooting unattended targets. Whether it's a fight somewhere, whether it's just random shootings, like people, this ain't Rambo. And that's what I worry about when we think about people with firearms inside of a church structure. Pastor Ed, any follow-up thoughts to that?
I mean, I love what everybody's saying. I think whether you have guns in your church or not, we all need to have an emergency plan. We can't wait until the building's burning down to have a plan, because that's where the hesitation comes from. That's where the pause comes from. You have to have disaster planning regardless, whether you are advocate for or against a gun in the church.
And I'll say, do you know how many people you can kill in 5 seconds? Do you realize how many people you can kill in 5 seconds? 5 seconds. If you count to 5 right now, I could probably kill 16 people. I could put off 16 rounds of my handgun in less than 5 seconds. And that's on semi-automatic. What if it's an automatic weapon? You don't have time to be thinking about, well, what should we do? What should we do? You have to have a plan in place, and you have to have your security set up in layers where you can mitigate that situation before it gets to that point. And you don't have to use force sometimes. Sometimes meeting somebody at the door, finding out who they are, especially if they're not a member of your church, and say, hey, welcome to our church. Are you here for service? This is your first time. They don't want you to know who they are. But if you confront them, you're more than likely to deter them. But when you leave your doors open and you just got Miss Mabel standing at the door, holding the door for you, you're inviting in trouble.
No, and full disclosure, and for the people that's watching that belong to the same church I do, Union Baptist Church, right before COVID, it might be a few years before, there was a theft ring going around targeting churches. And what they would do is come to the church, sit, and, they might come to Bible study on Wednesday, and they would come to service like Sunday school early in the morning, but they were targeted to rob the cash box or take stuff, because like most churches up until that point, Union Baptist had I don't know how many doors we have, 10 doors unsecured. Like every door, like you could go around the back of our church on the side for the people that's been in our facility, and no one would ever see you, back hallways. And that group had got into our church, and you just never know. And it made our church change the way we lock doors and have a single point of entry now. Not every door is open for everyone, because you would never think anything crazy like that would happen in church. And I know a few of us have referenced Mother Emanuel, especially in this area, and hopefully around the country, is something that was a wake-up call. that churches are soft targets. Tia, any thoughts about that?
No, I agree with you. Soft targets. I mean, and the thing about it is, you don't know who's coming into church. Um, like you said, people are targeting the churches. They come in and they scope things out. You don't know who's coming in. They come in, they're visitors. They are, I mean, they act just like we're acting. They have full conversation with you. You don't know people's motives these days. And I think one of the main things, just my perspective, the main things about, Christians and violence is, you know, even though the Bible says, do not take revenge, people don't want to wait for God's wrath.
Hold on, Tia. What you saying?
That's what I'm saying. God says, do not, Romans 12:17-19 is like, do not take revenge. It talks about do not taking revenge and leaving room for God's wrath. So when you hear that, people don't want to wait for that. They like, I don't know if I'm gonna get my, if God gonna, give his wrath, that's gonna be on this side or the other side. If it's gonna be on the other side, I'm not gonna see this, and I'm not gonna be. So I'm gonna do what I got to do right now. I think that's a real thing that people think, like, that goes through their mind when they say, I'm not waiting on that. And people really do that. They believe that they have to take action and they have to do something right then. The thing about the churches, though, we all grew up in Black churches, I'm assuming, and we know how vulnerable we've always been, counting money in the back room. And most of the, I guess you could say, men that would be protecting people in the church would be in the back. Most of those counting the money and going through things, and they would be in the back, and all the doors are open, all in the back, all on the sides, everything. So that vulnerability has been passed on from generation to generation into every aspect of the church. So it's not just, the doors, it's not just the counting the money. You wonder why more churches don't have safes in the back when you count the money. You just put the money in the safe until church is over. You wonder why more things like that aren't put into place. So it does require a lot of planning. But then you get into, well, who gonna add a code to the safe? You get into stuff like that. You get into the weeds of the details as opposed to the meat of the meal on what you need to do and having a plan and changing some of these things.
No, you make a good point. And what are your thoughts? Because I know we talk a lot, besides this incident, talk a lot about church and sometimes security within church. And Tia brings up a good point. Like, even churches have been slow to go to taking alternative methods of tithing. Like, bring your cash to the storehouse. All we want is dollars. We don't want digital currency. Like, we don't want anything to change. And it really makes us more vulnerable than someone using, and I'm saying Cash App, that's what's coming to my head, but more of an electronic way of payments. What are your thoughts?
You know how you feel about the white shoes?
Yes, sir.
That's what I feel about the offering baskets and tithing. Like, that's just old school, near and dear to my heart. That's the way I always did it. That's the way it's supposed to be done. Even though I know everything you said is right. And I've seen, I don't want to go into details, but yeah, I've seen situations where people have taken advantage of that. You know what I'm saying? Like, so you're right. But at the same time, you dealing with folks who necessarily are reluctant to change.
And say God is on their side about not changing.
Yeah. We'll put it like that. And then also, like when Al was talking about, putting the peephole in the accounting room, and you already know some folks like, what they doing in there with the door closed?
Yep.
We need to be able to see. Yeah, I don't need to be in there with the door closed, and I don't know what's going on there. So it's a whole lot along with that. Unfortunately, we live in a society where, like, these things come into play, and we really have to think about them and come up with good solutions. Yeah, man, I enjoy putting my money in that basket, man. I enjoy writing my check. Now, that's the only time I write a check
Is
in
in
the
church.
month. It's for tithe, and I enjoy walking up there, putting it in there, and
Look at
getting
Pastor Ed, like you the one
yeah,
that's messing us up.
yeah.
But
Direct deposit ain't don't feel the same. You know, I want to feel it. You know.
as we round close to the end of the show, I want to bring something up that's been kind of a theme, not only of last week's what do they call it, melee in Montgomery or brawl at the docks, but also something that almost a lot of us have touched on, the word of vengeance. And I'll start with you, Pastor Ed, about that topic of vengeance. When you start talking about getting your payback or getting your lick back or responding to something, where is that line of vengeance versus protection?
There is not like there is no biblical support for vengeance, right? Now, protection, defense, etc. Maybe you're trying to teach a lesson. I understand all that, but you trying to feel good by taking back what someone did to you is not biblical. Like there is no. Now you might have other reasons, like you're gonna make sure someone never messes with you again, like Everett said. But just straight up vengeance, you did me wrong, so I'm coming back on you. That's what Tia said. We don't want to wait on the Lord. We're saying, God, you taking too long, so I'm gonna do what you taking too long to do. And when we do that in any situation, we know what happens. You know, think about our lives. Every time we've done something where we're like, you taking too long, God, where do we end up? So I would just encourage people, be careful of that. Because you might feel good for a minute. I see people go to a funeral, like go to hangings, right? People would go to hangings or watch people get electrocuted. Like that makes you feel better. Like that doesn't do anything for me because my child's still dead or my wife is still dead or whatever. That doesn't really give me any kind of closure. But I mean, to each his own. But biblically, I would say the word vengeance is different than violence and protection, violence and defense. Taking care of if I see a woman getting raped, I should be able to step in. I shouldn't be just walking away. That's the violence that I am gonna engage in. But that's different than payback.
Okay. And Al, from your standpoint, I know there's probably some horrific crimes out there, and family members sometimes take the law into their own hands. Where is that line of vengeance and hey, let the law handle it. Let the police handle it.
That's a hard one. I know of a case where a young lady was raped and her cousin found out who did it and killed the guy who did it, and he was found not guilty in court because of it. Uh, I look at it like the death penalty, for instance. Uh, is the death penalty vengeance or is it closure? If you take a person's life and you are sentenced to death, and the state of South Carolina, whatever, whoever puts you to death, is that vengeance or is that closure? Because if we listen to what God said and wait on Him, was it His plan for this person to be put to death, or is that man's plan? It's hard to for me in law enforcement to sometimes separate the two, because I tell you, until you have driven in this patrol car and gone to see the worst of human nature, your way of thinking about vengeance is changed, because a lot of times when I go and I see someone who was raped and murdered, or some child who was killed or sexually abused by their father, the human in me wants vengeance. I want that person to go to jail. I want those people in jail to do everything to that person that person did to that child. That's what I think. That's exactly how I feel. The Christian in me says that he's got the answer to man's law. You know, man's law is going to be harsh, but his answer to God is going to be even worse, especially if that person doesn't repent. So it's hard for me to answer this question because my thought process is not normal. I'm not normal because I've seen the worst of human nature day in and day out. That's not me trying to get out of the question, but man, if you've been there with me to some of these crime scenes or interviewed some of these victims, you will understand where I'm coming from. Because I tell you, if something like any of this stuff happened to my family or happened to my wife, there is not a jail in the United States that can keep me from that person.
Yes, sir.
Is that vengeance or is that closure?
No, I'll go to Tia next on us. I'm saving Everett for last on the stop for a reason. As someone, Tia, that works with domestic violence and seeing the worst in people also from a human nature, the thought of vengeance or and I see people asking about closure. It's tough, right? And what are your thoughts?
I have to defer to the stuff that Al was saying simply because that last part that he brought up, I've been at the office with him before, and we've been in interviews with people before, and the things that we've heard and happening to young ladies, and and these people feel like they have no way out and things like this, and it is true. You want to take vengeance for them, you want the closure for them, and I'll just be honest with you, sometimes the vengeance is the closure. Sometimes the closure is the vengeance. And that closure may very well be that you went down the path of the law and the law took care of it. And that closure created the vengeance that you needed so that you could move on with your life, and vice versa. So for me, I think it's really hard because we say, as Christians, we should act and perform in a certain way. But I'm telling you, from life and situations in life, you'll be presented with things that will test that every single day, how far you're willing to take it, how far you're willing to go. Like, you'll be tested every single day. And I think nothing tests you more or tests you being a Christian more than when you see other people suffering and you can't give them the closure that they need. You can't give them the vengeance that they need. But being able to facilitate either of those things is a good feeling, but it still doesn't take away any of the pain that they had. It doesn't take away any of the hurt and things that they had. So just a small amount of closure is the vengeance that they need so that they can just move forward. I mean, it takes a long time to get through some of the stuff that you see and you hear from some of the women, some girls, even some boys, when they've been abused and things like that. Some of those things you never get through. And imagine the parents that had to listen and hear, and then those parents were not able to do anything. Like, things happen on the parents' roof and they don't know about, and the guilt that they have to go through and the guilt that they feel. But when they find out the vengeance that goes through their mind and wanting to protect their kid and wanting to vindicate their child, like, I wasn't there, so I have to do something. I need to do something for my child. So there's so many different levels to this conversation. Like, you can take it like you're a Christian and you believe in God and you believe in these things. However, there are certain situations that will take you well beyond anything that you've read in any belief system that you've ever had. It'll test you to the limit And you just have to have that self-control to be able to bring yourself back in and say, I gotta let God handle it because I am not equipped and I cannot do it. It's kind of like what Pastor Ed said about the gun. He knows his temper. He knows his temper. He's not equipped to carry that weapon and use it for the purpose it's supposed to have. He's not equipped to carry that tool and manage it correctly. So I think that's where we have to look at some of this stuff. Some of us are not equipped to hand out vengeance.
And let me say this. I 100% believe there's pure evil in the world. Like there's some people that have no conscience to create, to hurt, to destroy, pure evil in them. Whether we're saying that's demonic or your upbringing, but there's people out there that's will hurt you every single time if you allow. And Everett, I saved you last as we talk about this a lot about that line of vengeance and doing things. Even when we talked about the boat situation, that at some point it looked like folks just might have been going a little too far. Now I might not agree that it was going too far. But at some point, for people looking, it might look like things were not about protection anymore. It was about pure vengeance. What are your thoughts?
Hey, but to the point you just made about, there are some people who are evil and just on a mission to hurt other people. And I believe that Apostle Paul was one of those people. And where would we be if we had an active vengeance on him? Like that's half the New Testament right there. So, and I get your point. I believe like when we talk about closure, like man, like forgiveness, like truly forgiveness, like that's the only closure you're gonna have. And I understand I sound really naive, especially. What Al and Tia, what you guys are seeing, I'm can't dispute anything you're saying. This is difficult. Like this is why we don't do these things to each other. And that's one of the things I was thinking about also when, you read your Bible, that Paul was there when Stephen was murdered, part of the crowd, right? And like how does Stephen's mother feel about this great theologian Paul that we all hold in high regard? Like, you know what I mean? Like there are things that you can do to me that'll make me never forgive you again. And I'll know that I hold like regular grudges. You know what I'm saying? Like I can't imagine like murder, you didn't rape somebody, like you know what I mean? So like, and then I'll carry that around for the rest of my life. So man, it is so important for us to be human towards each other and treat each other, with love and respect. That golden rule, man. Like it means something. It matters and it's important. And then also I wanted to speak on the we talk about vengeance and punishment. And we look back at the Old Testament law as very harsh, an eye for an eye, like that's so harsh, a tooth for a tooth, that's so harsh. But that in those days and times, that was merciful. Like and you think about right now, if you take my eye out, I'm not gonna be satisfied with you losing your eye. Like I want something worse to happen to you. If you knock my tooth out, I want your kneecaps broken or something. Like I want you to feel something worse than I felt. And what even the Old Testament law, what we consider a harsh law, it was actually merciful because the punishment is only going to go so far, and it keeps things from escalating. Like if you take out my eye, I'll break your arm, and then you come back and break my leg. And then somebody gonna get stabbed. Now somebody's brother got to avenge that stabbing. So that Old Testament law was actually merciful, and then it kept people from being vengeful. And I think we got to have that same attitude when it comes to justice here in our own country, and even dealing with each other. Like we have to treat people with some mercy, and then finally as Christians we have to believe in redemption, especially for the people we don't like. that there's somebody you don't like right now who can give their life to God, go to heaven, and you got to spend an eternity with them. It's best to work that out right now. You know what I mean? Because ain't no room to work that out then.
And I've saved you last because I know your thoughts on this. So, and it's important. We talk about forgiveness. We talk about what happened on the cross. When someone's forgiven. Like sometimes we condemn people to eternal fire, and those will be the main people who can make their way into heaven, repenting and believing. Like, so it's tough. And the second reason I brought up this question as our last question, when we talk about violence, is really our whole street codes are built on this type of retaliatory violence. If you hurt me or one of my friends, now I got to hurt you even worse. And it just perpetuates a cycle of violence that it seemed very hard to get out of in most of our communities. Not that you personally did something to me, but I'm taking up for the other person who had something done to him that I might know, might have a connection or not. So it's tough. This whole show has been really, we started off lighthearted on purpose and moved to more tougher thoughts because we need that inside our Christian community and within our faith to have these tough conversations. In my opinion, singing happy songs all the time don't do it. You got to understand where people stand and how they're standing on whatever principles they're standing on, especially if we're professing to be men and women in Christ. And I think a lot of times we don't want to have the tough conversation. We don't want to hear Sister Betty talking about she'll pull a pistol out and shoot somebody if they did this. Like we want to hear the nice part of that, the testimonies all the time. But it's people really struggle with anger and violence in their life, and their whole upbringing has been violent. And it's just a perpetual cycle, sometimes inside the church and definitely outside the church. As we wrap up and close, I do want to thank all the people who watched and popped in and popped questions because, man, this is real life, like real life for a lot of people. All of us, in situations, all of us are going to watch the news today, tomorrow, and see some violence that's very close to you, that makes you think, hey, that could happen to me just as well as just happened to this random person. So stay prayed up, stay thinking about like how you will respond to stuff, because sometimes we have to know ourselves enough to know we can't put ourselves in certain positions because it's a bad outcome. Pastor Ed, any final thoughts?
Yeah, just real quick so I don't buffer again, because it's been a buffer night. But
you're fine.
For me, the main thing is, and I know I said it before, but we have to seek understanding, not agreement. We spend so much time thinking we have to agree on every issue that we don't talk about anything anymore. So it's like, well, I don't want to have an argument. But it's not about an argument about who's right all the time, because most escalations, both parties are wrong. In this case, what we watched, it wasn't that way, right? But most escalations, both people have a partially right portion and they have a partially wrong, or at least in their mind, they have a partially right and wrong. So I think trying to understand the why behind someone's actions is where we're going to fix some of these situations and stop curing the symptoms. We need to cure the underlying issues. And these underlying issues are, you have thousands of years of persecution. So you had folks jump in and say, I'm sick and tired of this. So I'm jumping across this water and I'm gonna get in this fight. That's what it comes down to. And I think we got to talk through these things and not just, like you said, it's great to sing a hymn and it's great to pray and it's great to do those things, but the church has to be more than that. We have to learn how to get outside of our comfort zone and have the tough conversations.
And Al, we want to thank you for your contribution tonight also, because you bring a lot. Any final thoughts?
It was a great topic when it was first brought to me. I was like, yeah, this is going to be tough. And I think the toughest question was the vengeance part. It's, to be honest with you, I never really thought about it until today. Today was the first time I really ever thought about it. And you actually made me start thinking while I'm sitting here waiting on, on people to talk. I was sitting here thinking, in as many years that I've been doing this job, I never really thought about it until today. I want to thank you for that. We have to stop choosing violence first, and violence should only come when there is no other recourse. We're so quick to want to throw hands and shoot people that we don't take the time to think about the consequences. And then you're sitting in my jail looking at me, wondering what you did wrong in your life. So people just need to take a deep breath and contemplate their actions before they take the actions, because what you see is vengeance, the state of South Carolina may see as murder.
Tia, any final thoughts? Great contribution also.
Not really mine. I think this has been a great show, a great panel. Everybody's had some really great points. Only last thing I can say is, again, self-control, because we have people watching us. We have people watching us, and the very people that we are trying to raise and deter from all the violence that's out here and some of the evil things that are going on in the world. We're saying, the younger generations, we're trying to move them into a different direction. They don't care about a lot of things. We had talked about this in our generational show last week, some of these gaps. And some of those gaps are where we jump in when we're not thinking. And we have those younger generations and we have our shadows watching what we're doing over and over and over again. And it's not watching the good things that they're mocking us on. It's not watching us pray and they go out and pray at the school. It's watching us cuss each other out, hit each other, push each other over. Those are the things that they're going out and displaying. Those are the things that they're mocking, the habits that they're learning at home. So we just have to be mindful of who's watching on any given day. You got to realize what you're putting out there in the world and at what point it's going to come back and hit you.
No, excellent point. Mr. Abel, great contribution. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, man, you mentioned the thief on the cross earlier, and it just put me in the mind of, we see this as a great story of redemption and forgiveness of God and Christ. But a lot of times we forget the fact that man stole from somebody. He was on that cross for a reason. And I just try to imagine myself, when I die and go to heaven, the guy that I watched steal from me, the guy that violated me and my household is up there too. I'm gonna want to talk to somebody about that, right? And so as Christians, we have to understand and realize like redemption is real and accept that. And just like that story of the prodigal son, like, the us quote unquote, good sons, like our heart has to go out to and for our lost brothers and sisters. And some of them are foul. Some of them just got all kind of, negative things going on. And they're people we don't necessarily want to associate with or want to be associated with. But that ain't why we here. And that ain't why we accepted this calling. Like we're to go after the lost sheep, leave those 99 and go after the one. And, I think one of the most powerful stories of redemption I ever heard, and I ain't got time to go into it, but just Google the story of Mary Johnson and O'Shea Israel, a woman whose son was murdered. And over the course of time, she developed a friendship with the murderer of her son to the point where he called her mom, she called him son. They lived right next door to each other. And until recently, before she got sick, they went all around the world telling people about the power of redemption. And like I said, I sound really naive because I haven't been through a lot of things that other people have been through. I haven't seen a lot of things that other people are seeing. Thank God for it. And I hope I never experience those things. But I need to believe in redemption. I don't get into heaven no other way. And we should extend that same, heart to people who are lost.
No, great group. Thank you for all the contribution tonight. Um, I am a firm believer as I get older, the very thing you say you won't do is the very thing you'll be tried with and tested on. And that's why we have to be careful two ways. One, speaking things into existence that are negative or evil, but two, playing God in our own lives. Like some of us think we're many gods walking around, so we create these situations that can only end one way. And me and Everett have talked about a few scenarios where if that person wasn't killed that day, how they were living their lives, they were going to be killed a later day. And we just have to be careful about perpetuating violence and stereotypes. Like I give Everett a hard time about being the Facebook police and reporting violent videos, but I know he's right. Like I know, like people watching a whole bunch of violence or even listening to a whole bunch of violence and bringing that into their subconscious, like that's normal. One way or the other, that will be normal for you. And we become less compassionate. So again, thank everyone for watching and joining and listening. Thank you, Pastor Ed. Thank you, Al, for what you brought to this topic. It was very important. Man, we never know. None of us never, ever know. And as a bow on the topic of the, whatever the cause is, the Montgomery brawl, or I hope if I'm in dire straits or in need, someone comes to save me also. And that's the truth. That people just don't watch and look and gawk. Pastor Ed, if his tires down, he's right. People will just ride by you. You run out of gas, you break down. Nah, folks act like they're not concerned. But I hope someone is compassionate enough for me that would help me if I'm in a true.
I'm gonna write a letter.
You write that letter. I need some real help. I'll write a letter back.
Yep, I'm gonna write a letter.
So thank you. Thank you for joining. Thank you for all the support that everyone provides to us each week, whether it's Sunday morning, Sunday evening, Thursdays. We appreciate it, and all our spotlight videos. So I am very thankful. Have a blessed and safe week, and tell someone you love them. It seems like every week someone I know is sick, and you know, as we get older, I know that's a part of life. But man, reach out to people and try to make rights that maybe have been wrong. Have a blessed Sunday. Have a blessed week. And thank you again.
God bless.
Take care.